Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on developing a career in communications while working remotely. My name is Alice Weightman. I'm the CEO and founder of two talent businesses, Hanson Search, which is a headhunting business in the communications space, and The Work Crowd, which is an online platform that connects businesses directly to talented freelancers across marketing and communications. And I'm joined today to discuss this topic on working remotely in the world of communications with three experts in HR and talent who are going to share their best advice, the tips out there that they can bring to the table, and also the challenges that people are facing within their businesses. So just as way of introduction, today I've got James, Claire, and Sam. James is a partner and head of HR at Portland Communications. He's got a wealth of experience in talent management and is going to sort of share his top tips and advice. He also comes from a recruitment background as well, and is early to say just before moving into HR. Claire is the HR director at ScienceMagic, has over 20 years of experience working with SMEs, corporates and PR agencies. ScienceMagic was previously known as the Communication Store, so I'm sure a number of you have heard of the Communication Store, but has rebranded and focuses on brands adding that extra magic in the communications world. And Sam Korn is a principal consultant at Hanson Search. He has focuses particularly on the financial communications industry, and is going to share some of his insights that he's experienced from talking to candidates in the market. And I know it's a tough time. You know, COVID has had many challenges, persistent challenges on people's lives and careers. And at the start of the year, it's normally a time when people start thinking about their lives and big picture of what they want to do and who they want to be and where they want to go. And, you know, it's added an extra complexity, the fact that we're all now continue to work from home, but lives and careers can't stop and they need to go on. But just we are challenged by the fact that we are obviously working remotely. I mean, it's positive that the vaccines have been rolled out and there's, you know, there's some definite positivity on the horizon, but we don't want to sort of wait till then. You know, individuals want to keep pushing forward with their career, and that's hard when perhaps you've just joined a new business and you want to be noticed. You're looking for that promotion and wanting to stand out from the crowd, but also you wanting to learn and develop, but you haven't got people around you to learn and develop from. So it'd be great to kind of go over to the panel and find out, you know, insights and challenges that they're seeing and how people are overcoming those challenges. And we'll listen from the panel, ask a few questions, but then please do use the functionality at the bottom of your screens to ask questions to our panel. So first of all, James, do you want to share your thoughts with us?
Yes, thanks, Alice. And yes, I absolutely was in recruitment. I'm still paying for that sin to this day. Yeah, I mean, look, it's an interesting time. I'll say the challenges are nothing new. You know, we've always had people in our industry who are ambitious, want to get on, want to be noticed. That hasn't changed. I think what is slightly unique about the situation at the moment is, you know, we're all working from our own homes. You can't observe. You can't be visible in the same way as you were before. And there are maybe some certain techniques which therefore have to adapt. But really, the outcome is the same. And the outcome is, you know, driven by individual behavior. So I'm here today to tell everybody who's in this room that, you know, getting promoted isn't something that happens to you. It's something that you earn and you drive yourself. It's always been the case. It's never been different. And what drives that promotion or that pay rise or that recognition, yeah, doesn't have to come in those forms. It can be a thank you, can't it? Sometimes that's all we need. That comes from being self-aware. Yeah. Where am I at the moment? What do I need to work on to get to the next level in terms of technical proficiency and in terms of behavioral input? Yeah. Where am I now? Where am I short in those areas? What do I need to change to move forward? Yeah. If there's no change, the status quo is going to remain. I know that's so logical, but when it comes to promotion and advancement, it's amazing how illogical we all get. And I include me in this as well, right? And so it's about owning that yourself, understanding where you need to get to, yeah, and building your own self-awareness and the awareness of the people around you of where you want to get to. So my top tip that I'm going to start with, and I'm not going to go into all of my thoughts now because we'll develop that as we dig deeper, but one of the challenges of working remotely is that your work bubble shrinks. Yeah. So you see a lot of the same number of people and virtually nothing of anybody else, which wouldn't happen in an office because you bump into people at the water cooler, in the kitchen, in the lift or whatever, at socials, team meetings, you overhear things that are happening, people on the phone, you get a sense of what's happening elsewhere in the business, you interact. At the moment, our work bubbles are really, really shrunken. You might see 6 to 8 people like all of the time, be sick to the death of them, and nothing of anybody else. And so what I would say is have a real think about how do you keep that work bubble as big as possible, and how do you be proactive about that? Not only because that's the different types of perspectives that might help you increase your self-awareness, that'll help you develop, but also these people can be advocates for you when it actually comes to decision making around pay and promotion as well. So there's 2 sides to that. So one big tip for now as I pass on is don't let that work bubble shrink. I know it's difficult, but be creative about the way you keep that bigger.
Great, thank you. I love the concept of work bubble. I'm going to quote you on that. Claire, do you want to share your thoughts?
Absolutely, and thanks, James. I couldn't agree more. And I've got a few thoughts about work bubble sort of constructs and how we can go about building those. I think for so many people, the last 12 months has been more about survival. And for a time, development and career progression may well have slipped down the list of our priorities. Having said that, I think the conflict with that is also that during the backdrop of the pandemic, working at home, work has just dominated our lives in a way that, frankly, it hasn't ever as well before. So I think that our professional lives have become a huge focus. So it's only natural, as you say, especially at this time of year, that people are pausing for reflection, asking themselves what's next and how can they achieve that next step when we're all handling a very new and unique set of work from home. So knowing that so many of our normal touch points for development and progression have been impacted and reduced, my advice really stands around being more thoughtful and more strategic in achieving those goals for development and progression. For me, it's not about doing more. It's about being really thoughtful and precise about what you need to achieve so that you can achieve that impact in the best possible way. At ScienceMagic.Inc, we've tried to keep things normal for people where we can. So we've kept our 6 monthly performance check-ins, but we've tried to make them more less formal so that people can feel that we're more available and supportive. And often that has then created a better environment for conversations about personal goals. And I'm pleased that we have been able to recognise some promotions, albeit it's obviously been very difficult for the wider business. So I think, in terms of people who are managing staff, my advice would be, make sure that you are having those check-ins, having those points of contact as much as possible, because those are those opportunities for sharing knowledge and offering chances to staff to work together and learn from one another. I think that the point around mental well-being at this time is absolutely vital. As I said earlier, it's not about doing more, because if we do more, we're just going to fall over. It's really about making sure that we're thinking about what we need to achieve, being strategic in that approach, and making sure that we're not burning out, because it's a real risk right now with kind of all the competing demands that we're dealing with. And I think within that, it's about finding areas that you are passionate about and you're curious about. To James's point earlier, don't necessarily always make it about the title or the salary that you're wanting to achieve as your main motivator. Do it for yourself. What do you want to be better at? What do you want to be? What are you interested in? With that focus, hopefully also then your drive can feel really authentic. You'll want to find the time to do it, and it will naturally feed into your activities at work and in your personal life. And I think that that's something I would really encourage people at this time as well. In terms of some of the practical takeaways, clearly there's always line managers and HR teams to help you. Those are always your first go-to points to have those conversations about progression. But to James's point, positively and proactively seek feedback. So, build that self-awareness. What is it about yourself and your skill set right now that needs to move forward and change and develop? And then you can really find sort of opportunities to kind of improve in that way. One thing I definitely wanted to kind of also recommend, which I think we found really powerful in our business, is mentoring. And that could well be not just finding a mentor for yourself, whether it's in the company you work for or perhaps outside of the company. I know that relationships with line managers, to James's point, in our very reduced bubbles can sometimes feel as though they need to be bigger than that. What else am I missing? A mentor may well really be useful in that regard. And indeed, on the flip, are you at a point in your career where you might be able to offer yourself up as a mentor to other people? That's a really great way of expanding coaching and leadership development skills in a way that you might be missing in the current environment. So I think that that's definitely something to bear in mind. And I think that, network building our bubbles, absolutely vital. We're really proud at SMI about a number of kind of self-ordained groups that have come to life over the last 18 months. We've got intersectionality committee that supports diversity inclusion initiatives, volunteering group, pro bono groups. These are great ways for people to meet other people outside of their core bubbles at work, learn from colleagues in different parts of the business, learn new skills, build their profile. So, have a think about what those opportunities are with where you're working right now. And if there aren't those sorts of groups, think about within the business's ambitions of the next 12 months, what could you perhaps bring to the table to set that up yourself? It's a really instant impact type of sort of initiative if you could do that. So yeah, those are some initial thoughts.
Great. Thank you, Claire. Sam, can I hand over to you just to sort of get an insight for what you've seen in the market?
Yes, thank you. I mean, I completely agree with everything that James and Claire both said. I think coming at it from a slightly different angle on the recruiter side of things and speaking to, a huge number of people every day, every week and every month. Ahead of this call, I sort of took a slightly different approach and I Googled, how to develop and progress your career in lockdown, just to see what was out there, see what was already kind of being discussed. And actually, I was shocked at the vast majority of what was out there, really focused on moving jobs as opposed to actually, the reality within which you currently exist. Maybe that's an odd thing for recruiters, well, the following is an odd thing for recruiters to say, but I completely and utterly disagree with that. I think, the advice to brush up your CV and practice your interviewing is, that's one element, but that's very much getting to the end of the line as opposed to actually paying attention to the reality within which you're in. I think there's kind of three elements to this from a personal perspective of developing and progressing your career. And I think the first point is, how do we communicate in lockdown? How do we communicate remotely? How do we actually improve the reality that we're currently in? To James's point, our bubbles have become much, much smaller, and the natural links between perhaps bubbles that would have existed in the office are gone, and we need to drive those. There's a natural current or a natural stream that you can flow in the office, and things tend to happen, moments tend to happen, whether that's idea generation or moments that allow us to vent in a way and release some pressure, and all of that is super helpful for mental health. We don't have that in the current situation. I think the second point here is understanding the role that you play in your own development. Again, James mentioned that a promotion is not something that is given to you. It's something you need to earn, but also something that you can put the building blocks in place for. Day in, day out, we're having conversations with people about what's best, breadth or depth. And my point is always, ignore the argument, focus on yourself. What are you drawn to? What are you passionate about? Again, to Claire's point. And yes, a final point within that is the element of progressing one's career, and an element of that is moving jobs. That's always going to be a factor. And again, I think to kind of add a slightly different element to this, the current state of the job market within marketing communications, it is active. But actually, from this point of view, and I suppose in terms of developing one's career with the longer term in mind, it's really about doing the due diligence and understanding what you yourself are after, but also the flip side of that, what businesses are after as well. And for all of this, the kind of key is lean into the tech, be present in everything that you're doing with, engage with individuals. And I suppose the major takeaway is pay attention to the realities of other people's lives. Do they have kids? Do they have a young, dog that's yapping away in the background? What's their internet setup? Where are they based? Are they with family? So actually their work from home setup is probably not adequate. I think starting with what is the reality of the person that I'm speaking to, as opposed to necessarily, your own reality is obviously very important, but I think starting with that engenders a conversation which, it creates a level playing field from the start and means that any conversation can be much, much more meaningful and positive from both sides. It's very easy to, I suppose, feel that one can disappear into the background a little bit. But at the end of the day, you are probably the only one that's going to suffer from that for the most part. And sometimes it's easier. But I think it's also a case of just be the current, be that stream and engage with people, reach out to people that are not within your immediate sphere. Just, it doesn't have to be an hour. It doesn't have to be anything particularly onerous. A 15-minute chat, how's things? What are you watching on Netflix? Other providers are available, and so on and so forth. It's really just about kind of being present and engaging with people in a way that actually this is not necessarily a benefit, but this is an opportunity for us to engage with people. Perhaps in an office setting, we wouldn't have the opportunity to engage with.
Great, thank you for sharing that, Sam. So lots of big topics actually in there, and I've been scribbling away with notes. Let's first of all look at this bubble concept, because I think that's a nice analogy of it. And James, I know when we spoke, you talked about this sort of shrinking work bubble that was happening. And you were sort of sharing some insights and thoughts about what you had recommended at Portland and were doing. And Claire, actually, you sort of shared a few in when you were talking. James, do you want to sort of expand on that concept?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's easy to accept this shrinking, I think, is the point. I started off by saying I was going to challenge the audience by saying, think about what's within your control. And I thought Claire put it really, really well. How can you get cross business? There will be avenues that you can take. It's not all out of your control. Mentor schemes. Same at Portland, we've got a mentor scheme. We've got various employee committees. One of them's on diversity and inclusion, for example. What about if you want to be known for being good at something, why not develop a training session on it? What a brilliant way to position yourself in the organization as a specialist in something, running a brainstorm, putting a proposal together, whatever it might be. So you automatically position yourself in the organization, but you're also, most businesses' values are about transferring of knowledge in some way or other. And therefore you are living that out every single day. And you've got a clear example you can use when you get to your review. And also I think that it's also the concept of asking for feedback that I was talking about, and that concept of self-awareness. If your work bubble is shrinking, then so will your ability to broaden your horizons. And ultimately you need that feedback, because every piece of feedback is an opportunity to improve. Once again, it comes back to what's within your control in your own career, which is every bit of feedback you get is an opportunity to improve. We shrink away, we're all scared of receiving feedback, but you have to put yourself out there and make it happen. And I've been using this with new starters quite a lot, because I think it's particularly difficult for new starters who don't have existing relationships in the organization, right? So you haven't developed that rapport and trust, which we've all been keeping going for the last year on Zoom calls. But for new people who are creating relationships from scratch, that's particularly difficult. I've been saying to them, there is an annoying scale of employees. Every single human has an annoying scale, right? Obviously, it's received in different ways by other individuals. But my advice to all of our new starters has been, be on the annoying end. Be on the annoying end. Because ultimately, that's how you're going to put yourself out there. Ask the questions, gain the knowledge, get face recognition, name recognition, Yeah, it puts you front and center of mind. So if they are thinking about, oh, I'm going to ask that person's opinion, or we're going to, you know, we need to resource this new project that's come in, your name's already on their mind. And it's, you know, you do have to be respectful. Sam's right. You have to be respectful of people's time. It is finite. Yeah. So you can't be, you know, too annoying. Otherwise, I'm not going to be an advocate for you. But there is still a balance. And I think the balance is more towards the annoying side. So it's all about, you know, being proactive and using that time really valuably. I think the last thing I would say about it, which is, you know, a lot of people talked about the guilt. So if you know, on one hand, we've got James Madeley saying, be proactive. And on the other end, I've got a manager who I know is really, really busy doing homeschooling, working between the hours of 8 and midnight, you know, and the hours of 4 and 8 a.m., you know, kind of thing. And I'm just worried about, you know, I don't want to be too much of a burden on them, and they don't really want to be talking about me, and that they seem a little bit, you know, not quite, you know, with it. But it's all about, okay, time is finite. So it's about planning your time. Again, it's within your own control. When you do get time with your manager, yeah, you have to accept, A, that you want to talk about your career, because if you don't prioritize your own development, you can't expect them to. Once you've decided that you're going to prioritize your career and prioritize that conversation, what does that conversation need to look like? What are the things that you want to share with them? Maybe it's you giving them feedback. Maybe it's because you're confused about where you are because you thought you were going to get a promotion, but you haven't been given one. You really need to understand why and take a few backward steps. Otherwise, resentment will build and everything else. So really, you know, come prepared for that meeting. And when I say prepared, I mean literally a few bullet points on a piece of paper. And before you finish the conversation, tick it all off. Because I know what it's like. You turn up for a conversation with your manager to talk about your development. They want to talk about what they want to talk about, right? And also, in the moment, you kind of slightly forget what you want to say, and you leave the room or leave the Zoom call, and you're like, oh, why didn't I forgot to mention this, this, and this. Oh, well, and then another 2 months before you build up to it again. So if you do build up to have a difficult conversation about your career, prepare for it properly and make sure it happens. So time is finite, use it well.
Absolutely. Thank you. I can see, Claire, you're nodding a lot to that. You obviously similar
I completely agree. And I think that what I would just sort of add as some builds on that in terms of that prep work, because, you know, I think to everything that James said rings completely true, but I think keeping a really open mind as well, you know, that's, you know, to James's point about considering where other people are in their lives and in their professions right now, also thinking about your employer. So, you know, the fact is that you're perfectly entitled and right to prioritize your career and your development. That is not in dispute, but bear in mind the realities of where so many businesses are right now, because if by doing that and going in with that more open mind, I think you'll allow for a better and more transparent conversation that will be more healthy and more constructive. You know, so many employers right now will want to be doing more than they are for their staff because of potential financial constraints and things like that as a result of the pandemic. But there is more that can be done to look after and nurture staff than just salary. And many staff managers will be very open to that, as will HR teams, but come with those suggestions. You know, we're dealing with, unprecedented moments, you know, we don't have all the answers. And so if you can kind of create a different environment for that conversation, be proactive, be thoughtful, be curious about other things that are going on in the business, I think it's that sort of really, that approach that will really create some positive change.
Absolutely. On the sort of learning and development piece, you've given some advice already, but, you know, when you're in an office, you've got your peers amongst you, you've got your manager, you can listen to them on the phone, you can see them interacting in client meetings. What advice would you give to individuals who is worried that they're not learning enough and not progressing? How can they sort of fill in the gaps? And what are you seeing in your businesses to support, you know, maybe more junior members of the team to get up there and to learn the skills and the art of communication that they need in their work? James, do you want to take? Oh, Claire, sorry, you take that one.
No, go for it. I'll go first, and then James will be able to fill in the gaps. I think that it's really about looking at it on a sort of multifaceted basis. I think that also, to James's point earlier about time being very precious, workloads are very intense right now for so many people. But I think prioritizing your learning and development is really vital. You've got to own it. You can't think sort of for other people to give it to you. So, it'll be everything from listening to podcasts to reading to articles, but also, again, sort of asking and finding those moments where you can inquire and ask questions about how things have come about. Is there then an opportunity for you to be involved in the preparation of the next pitch deck, for example, that might be going out, so you can learn some of those new business skills? Is it about you asking to perhaps record a meeting that you might be able to watch back in your own time, or ideally even just join it as a sort of silent partner to observe and learn that way? Because frankly, you have to get involved in the moment in order to really have that, I think, that genuine learning. There's lots of training courses which are always very beneficial, but I'm a strong believer that doing is the best way of learning, and really kind of in honing those skills. So I think those are just some real sort of tactical suggestions about how people can help themselves.
Right.
Yeah, I think on the job is slightly more restrained in that observational side of learning, so seeing people role model behavior, role modeling how they're delivering the work. But it's still possible. Yeah, we're still joining Zoom calls, we're still joining pitch teams. You can still see how people are adapting to this remote environment. And actually, it's going to become more complicated looking ahead, because you can have some people in office, some people remote. And how does that work? So, but I think the fundamentals of on the job are absolutely still there, just as Claire said, which is, you understand where you're at, know where you want to get to, make sure other people know that as well. And then when, your projects are being resourced, tasks are being delegated, there's the opportunity at least for those things to be aligned to your personal objectives. Yeah. And that will help you eventually get to where you get to. That's where you're doing the doing. And then it's about making sure that you're protecting time after you've done the doing to do reflection. Now, that could be with a mentor, it could be with your line manager, it could be with your project lead, and I'd recommend you try and make that happen. I know it's difficult because you're then resourced onto the next project and off you go, sprint as quickly as you can again. But one thing that is within your control, even if you can't get that time, is personal reflection. You can still do personal reflection. And, there are questions, if you Google it, reflection questions, open-ended questions like, what could I do differently? Would I do something differently? And then what would you do differently next time? What was the outcome? How could it be improved moving forwards? How has that made me feel? All these types of questions. It's almost like a self-coaching thing. That reflection time is where you then embed the learning of what you've done. Yeah, so that is still really, really important. And what people need to understand is that there's a direct link between that and getting promoted and pay rises. Because if you are developing and you're developing and you're achieving your objectives, then you've got a very good chance of being paid and promoted. There might be business reasons why that's impossible, pay constraints, all the rest of it. And then the option's back to you. Is that good enough? Does this business and the job that you're doing still offer you what you need, or do you need to move on? I think most people can accept not getting a pay rise or a promotion as long as it doesn't come as a shock. Yeah. So if there's a lack of understanding or, between you and your line manager about what you want to achieve, you think you've achieved it and you rock up to your review and you're told that you've been rubbish all year and that you've not heard any of this feedback before, that's where you get angry, right? But if you've achieved your objectives and you get promoted, brilliant. If you haven't and there's external reasons out of your control, then sometimes you have to just stand back and kind of accept that. So I think that on the job learning is still a big thing. Mentoring schemes, really, really important to get different perspectives. They could be formal or informal. It doesn't have to be a formal mentoring relationship. It could be people that you trust. It could be one of your project leads on one of your accounts. And then finally on training, I agree, so many people turn up to training and expect it to be just sort of downloaded into your head and you go away and you deliver the learning. It doesn't happen like that. Training is to create a space for reflection, basically. That's what it is. It's to help you pause from that fast-paced life and work life that you have, to pause and be in the moment. Think about, what are we talking about? What's the subject matter? What's my own experience? What can I learn from that? And what's so brilliant about training is what other people's experience is, how have they adapted to it. One question that I will give you all as you go away from this is, do you know what training is on offer in your business? And if you don't, how can you find out? And if it is on offer, are you going? Because I think there's quite a lot of people out there who are too busy to go to training, and then we'll get to their review and be like, okay, well, I've not been given the opportunity to learn. Now, there might be a lot of truth in that in terms of the way projects have been resourced and things like that. But in terms of training, that is something that's within your time to create time to go. And I think if there's a barrier to you going, which could be your manager you feel or whatever, ask, is it really them? And if it is really them, how can you solve that? Because I think that, most businesses that I'm aware of offer good training, and it isn't always brilliantly attended. So that, again, that's something that's potentially within your control to go and do. It's a space for you to reflect.
That's really interesting, actually. I'd love to hear Sam's thoughts from a candidate perspective. If actually candidates are sort of saying that as reasons to move, and in fact they haven't really deep dived into their own companies to fully maximize the potential that's on offer. And I also, just before I turn to you, Sam, I like the idea of mentoring, because often people do say, how do I get a mentor? But actually driving that and thinking about a mentor yourself, and that could be people around you, it doesn't have to be external people, is great. But over to you, Sam.
I mean, I think the importance of self-reflection cannot be overstated. I think one of the kind of natural byproducts of continual self-reflection, and particularly in the current situation, one of the, I suppose, the elements that it just breeds is a natural development of your commercial awareness and understanding how different things interplay. Being able to look at yourself, we are our own worst critics. If you can criticize yourself, you can look back on a project and criticize where things could have done better, that's for sure. So I think the importance of self-reflection can't be overstated in that way. I think from a sort of interacting with individuals, being self-reflective ahead of calls or when a question is asked will also allow you to kind of skip steps in those conversations and have much more meaningful chats, whether it's with managers, whether it's with clients. Actually almost, answer as many of the questions that you think they're going to ask ahead of that call. It means that you'll get further. Naturally, you'll travel more distance in that conversation, in that review, in that client meeting, whatever it might be. I think interestingly, I suppose coming at it again from a sort of the backward angle, the very best individuals out there, from my perspective, are those that are commercially aware and understand how A impacts B and B impacts C, not only for themselves, but equally the broader business. And I suppose, given the current situation, how they can very easily affect progress in their career just by, I suppose, bleeding out from A into B and B into C naturally over time. And the key there is, for the most part, the trait that people have is that emotional intelligence to be able to self-reflect. We've talked a lot, obviously, about mental health, and I think understanding that you control your own destiny and you control your own progression is key. But I think that's the upside, the baseline foundation that really needs to be stated for, or particularly, I suppose, the mid-level people out there and the junior individuals that don't feel they're necessarily in control. It's the balance to being in control is also understanding when and how to ask for help, understanding that you have a route to ask for help. And if you can self-reflect on asking for help, then actually you're going to be solutions orientated rather than problem focused. And so that, the ability to ask for help needs to counterbalance the understanding of the control you have on your own progress and development.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to ask the audience, go over to the audience quite quickly, because we've only got about 15 minutes left of the discussion, and it'd be great to sort of get some questions from the audience. So please do use that, the chat or the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. But I have already had some questions coming in. So it'd be great to put that to the panel. One was a little bit on crystal balling. So, what's the latter half of the year going to look like as we sort of hopefully move out of lockdown, and how will that affect people's careers and career development? And what do you think the future of the career landscape is going to look like? I know there's obviously, from a talent perspective, a lot of sort of hiring taking place, but it'd be interesting. James, what's your thoughts on that?
I think it looks like a golden land of opportunity second half of this year, but so did the second half of last year. So I don't want to necessarily get too ahead of myself. But I think what's really exciting is the potential return to the office. And I don't mean return to the old ways. I mean the opportunity to interact, socialize, and collaborate with your employees face to face again. I think that what's really exciting in terms of career development and progression, which is what we want to talk about on this call, is that I think it'll be about working out what is the working from home best for and what is working in the office best for. Okay. And I think that what people are doing is running to one end of that spectrum or the other. Yeah. And it's usually driven either by, stubbornness in the old ways is the way of working, or there's cost savings by getting rid of offices. They're some of the driving factors that I see. And I want the HR profession, but also the communications and PR profession to be thinking much more ambitiously about this opportunity, because it's a spectrum. It isn't a black and white situation. And I think that where businesses are on that spectrum will depend on what they do, what their cultures and values are, and what their people want. But also on an individual level, what is going to get the best out of me? What is going to help me reach my full potential? And I think that most businesses who have got a clue are going to have enough flexibility for people to adapt somewhere on that spectrum. Yeah, because I've always been a believer that if every employee reaches its potential, then the business is going to reach its own, and we'll be hitting our targets and everything's going to be basically fine. So that's what I'm looking forward to the second half of the year. Hope from a personal point of view, I've always needed to work from home because I've needed the space to review work that's come through, to write training courses. I can't be getting interrupted while that's happening. There's always a crisis that's going on somewhere in HR, right? And it'll always draw you in. There's a real opportunity to close the door, switch off your emails and focus on your project work or on the reviewing your team's work. And then in the office, great opportunity to socialize with your team, go for a drink with them, collaborate, be in a brainstorm face to face, I think is more powerful. Company socials, things like that make you feel part of the whole. I think there'll be a lot of people on this call, especially if they've joined a business in the last 12 months, who don't 100% feel part of that business. They're actioning tasks, they're delivering project work. But one of the great things about being employed rather than working for yourself is being part of a greater thing and having fun with those people. And I think that that's the thing I'm most looking forward to in the second half of the year, is having fun with my colleagues.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on the second half of the year, Claire?
I think James said it fantastically, but for me, it's going to be about learning a hybrid model. I think that for me, exactly right. I really would be quite disheartened if they would kind of swing all back to where we were kind of like 2 years ago, because I think that the breakthrough of flexible working and working from home, as kind of millions of people have demonstrated over the last 12 months, has been tremendous. Pats on the backs all round. And I think that, there are real advantages to that, but it is not one or the other. It is a mixture of the two, and every business will have a different gradient depending on what their product line is and what their service offering is, but also within that, individuals as well. And I think that there we've got this kind of option to kind of dial it up and dial it down. And I think, frankly, the planning that we're putting into the business right now is, okay, there's obviously so much uncertainty still, lots of optimism, but still uncertainty. So let's try things, in the spring, try things in the summer. And within that, continually seek feedback from the business about what's going to work for them as individuals and as teams, so that we can then use, hopefully, the positive experiences of the last 12 months to formulate real flexibility, not sort of flexibility in a policy, for us to kind of thrive going forward. And I think that there's frankly no getting away from the fact that, as we've identified in this call, there are real barriers to working in isolation, physical isolation from other people, and being able to be back around colleagues and friends again, something we're all chopping at the bit for, I know.
Absolutely. And one question we've had through is obviously, our lives have changed. Digital communication has played a significantly more important role than traditional PR methods. And what should PR practitioners do to upskill themselves and also convince clients of the importance to adapt to these new forms of communication. I don't know who wants to take that one.
I'm happy to kick it off. I think that really it's sort of the evidence of that is all around us now. And so, you know, for brands and for companies to be surviving in the new world and the changing world, I think it's, you know, it's quite evident that the bricks and mortar model of more traditional sort of work has had to change dramatically. But again, I think that the point around the working from home and working in the office it kind of rings true as well. The solutions here will not be one thing or the other. You know, we are human beings. We thrive on contact with one another and being around each other. And so therefore, you know, the solutions will always be a mixture and a hybrid as well. And I think that, you know, there are ample sort of opportunities around us, both within our own companies, I'm sure, but also in the wider market. And sort of industry bodies, that those are sort of, you know, your go-tos to really sort of lift the lid on those sorts of skills if you're feeling like you're starting from scratch. And I think that people should be very proud of the skills that they've got already, but be looking to kind of just develop those and fine-tune them within their passion points. I don't think people should be feeling as though they're going to be massively out of date. You know, the fundamental skills will remain absolutely needed. It's just maybe some of the channels that might need a bit of kind of developing over time.
Absolutely. We've had a question about someone moving to the UK and what advice for newcomers to understand the local UK market. Perhaps, Sam, you could help that for someone who's looking for work, and what advice would you offer them?
I think it's realistically throw yourself into every single conversation you can. You know, at that situation, knowledge, information, you know, is key. It's amazing how people are willing to just, you know, even if it's 30 minutes, just kind of sit down, or whether that be virtually or in person, and just kind of download, you know, tell you their view, tell you their thoughts, what they think is going to happen over the next few months, year. So it's really about taking the opportunity to kind of understand the entire picture. I think there can be quite a bit of, you know, find one rabbit hole and jump down it, and before you know, you come back up to the surface and you've maybe slightly lost your way. You know, take your time to kind of review the entire field of play, get an understanding of how different people, you know, view things. To the point we made there just on digital, I think, and Claire mentioned this, you know, you're not going to be left behind. The fact is that so many words, digital for one, you know, last year was integration, the year before it was something else. These are words that are being used and defined differently by everybody, to the point where actually what they are at this point is to a degree unclear, and each business, each person, each vertical sector team defines it differently. You're not going to be left behind. But actually, if you're moving to it, whether it's a new company or a new region, just immerse yourself in it. You know, it's not dissimilar to kind of learning a language, I guess. Just immerse yourself in it. Don't be afraid to speak to people that, you know, you might be intimidated by, or people that are introduced through 8 different degrees of connection that feel really quite removed. You know, indulge it, immerse yourself in it, and quite frankly, enjoy it. Enjoy having all of these conversations. You know, the PR and comms industry is a network-driven one. It's why people are in the industry. It's because of that people element to it. So there's no better time than to indulge that.
Great, thank you for that. One question from someone who actually was in PR and then public affairs, and then took some time out in their career and feels they've got a gap in their skill set. We've covered a little bit about sort of self-development, but just wondering sort of what their thoughts are of having the PR and public affairs. I mean, I'll perhaps pass that to James, coming from more of a consultancy that does more sort of corporate and public affairs. I mean, my thoughts are absolutely brilliant. Everyone's looking for a broader skill sets in today's market, but it'd be great to hear from James as well. Yeah,
I mean, send me your CV. sounds right up our street. But no, I think it's still integration has been a word and used in the comms industry for some time, and it's true that I think a lot of clients are looking for, you know, integrated work, integrated campaigns. But that doesn't mean that it has to all be delivered by one person, right, who has all of those skills. It's about, and this is certainly with Portland, with our health team and with our public affairs and corporate communications, disputes, litigation, you know, it's about being able to offer all of those services. And, you know, I think it's still important for people to have a specialism, something that they are say is like, you know, a core skill of theirs. It's like I'm an HR director, but I'd say my core skill is always going to be talent, whether it's talent acquisition or talent development, will always be sort of at my core and my center. Doesn't mean I can't do all the other things. So I think it's good if you have the understanding of different areas of PR, of communications, but ultimately if public affairs is the thing that, you know, is at your core, is your passion that will drive you forward, you need to have all of those things to be, you need to have all of those things to be motivated, to perform well, to progress. So I wouldn't say, you know, leave that behind. It's about enhancement. It's the same with digital. It's not to replace, it's to enhance. And the people who can work out what the enhancement bit is are the people who'll get on. So yeah, Sunday CV.
Great. And one last question. I know it's time to close, but we'll squeeze this one in. I'm not 100% sure on the angle, but what are some of the practical ways commercial awareness snowballs into growth in the workplace? So I guess what sort of commercial tips that enable businesses to grow, I think, is the angle that they're looking to take. Claire, I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, question. Sure. I think you know, certainly when I'm advising people about progression, you know, commercial awareness is going to be part of that development as you reach the more senior levels of your career, you know, and I think that frankly, you can start building that awareness at any point you want. And I think, you know, to some of the conversations we've already touched on, it's not about replacing one expertise with another. It's about layering it up so that, you know, everything that you do can become more enhanced. You know, and I think that, you know, use some of the tips and techniques that we've talked about today about injecting yourself into different conversations, opening up different conversations with people in the business, you know, speak to your finance team. Is it as simple as frankly being able to work your way around a sales sheet and understand things like that, and sort of try to open up those different conversations. So I think it will very much depend on what level you're at in the business and what your responsibilities are. But I think, you know, there's certainly, you know, in all our roles, an appreciation of commerciality is vital. So it's a good thing to kind of start on as soon as you can.
Yeah, and if I could just quickly jump in on that, I mean, define what commercial awareness is in your organization, right? Because is it like revenue target really is what they mean? But how you achieve that through commercial awareness means lots of different things. You know, is your area that you need to develop in around winning new business? Or is it around organic growth in already established clients? Is it about having a growth strategy? Or is it about more sort of operational management? Are you over-servicing your clients? What's your margin? What's your profit margin like? And the truth is, it could be any of those things, right? But work out what it means specific to you, not just something that will be sort of delivered in a training room. I would be working out what that means to you and your projects that you work on. And that will differ, as Claire says, depending on where you're at with your career. But define what commercial awareness is to you, develop an objective around it with your line manager, and go away and hit it.
I think I'd just jump in here, just on a final note on the commercial awareness point. I think particularly early stage in one's career, the sort of early stages of developing commercial awareness and how that snowballs into growth progression within the business, it is seeking out opportunities and jumping into those head first. You know, maybe the first opportunity, you know, it's the wrong one, or it was a tangential use of your time or something. But without doing that, you're never going to know which ones are the right ones to chase down the rabbit hole. So I think as far as particularly at the early stage of one's career, it's just about being open-minded to opportunities. And again, going back to the point we made earlier, following that, self-reflecting on, you know, was it a good use of my time? How would I have done it better? Because, you know, we're just kind of plugging all of the elements in that mean that you'll have the toolbox later on in your career to pull out the background knowledge on these things. And it doesn't go unnoticed. You know, people taking opportunities and seeking out opportunities, it doesn't go unnoticed within a business in the eyes of managers.
Well, thank you very much indeed. A quick comment there saying much appreciated. So we've had some lovely positive comments coming through. And I think, you know, it's taught everyone a lot about sort of the importance of self-reflection, the importance of driving your own career. And, you know, Claire, James, Sam, you've shared some really useful insights and takeaways for everyone there. I was on a previous webinar just before this one, and Angie Moxon, who is the founder of Three Monkeys and Saltazino, great quote from her. She said, "We have to be the change we want to see." So love it. And I think everything you guys have said today is absolutely summing up that. So thank you, all three of you, on behalf of the audience, for sharing that. I think it's really useful, and we will be distributing that out. We have recorded this, so do share with your colleagues if you think it's useful. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.